What would you do if you had exactly $11 left to your name, and a stranger needed 10 of them? I don't mean that as a hypothetical. I mean it the way life sometimes forces you to mean it. Standing there, hands in your pockets, knowing the answer before you even finish asking the question. That's where this story begins. Not with a dramatic storm, not with thunder shaking the windows. Just a Tuesday afternoon in September, the kind that feels like the whole world forgot to show up, and a woman named Audrey Banks standing outside a Walgreens in Columbus, Ohio, trying to decide whether to buy the off-brand pain reliever or save the money for gas. She chose the gas. She always chose the practical thing. That was Audrey. She was 53 years old, and if you passed her on the street, you wouldn't look twice. Medium height, reading glasses pushed up on her head even when she didn't need them. A tote bag from a library book sale that she'd been carrying for 6 years because it still had good handles. She wore her silver-streaked loques pinned back most days, not because she was trying to look professional, but because she didn't have time to think about her hair anymore. She worked the early shift at a grocery distributions warehouse on the east side of Columbus, the kind of job where you clock in at 4:30 in the morning and your body doesn't stop hurting until sometime around Wednesday. She'd been doing it for 9 years. Before that, she'd done something entirely different. Something that, if you knew about it, would make you look at Audrey Banks a second time. But that was the thing about Audrey she didn't talk about before. She had a small house. Well, her name was on the mortgage, anyway. In Linden, the kind of neighborhood where the corner stores had bulletproof glass, and the elementary school did fundraisers every year just to keep the art program alive. She lived there with her mother, Shirley, who was 78, and had the kind of slow-moving dementia that doesn't take everything at once but takes a little more each month, like water wearing down a stone. Shirley needed medication that the insurance covered mostly, but not entirely. She needed groceries adjusted for what her stomach could still handle. She needed someone to sit with her on Sunday afternoons and watch old game shows and not make her feel like a burden, even when she asked the same question 4 times in 20 minutes. Audrey was that someone. She was the only someone. She had a coworker named Pete, who sometimes asked her to go out after their shift to get breakfast at the diner 2 blocks from the warehouse. She said yes, maybe once every 3 months, because once every 3 months she could afford the eggs and toast without doing the math in her head the entire time she was eating. The Tuesday in September that this story really starts, Audrey had $11 in her checking account, a quarter tank of gas, and a little of things she was telling herself weren't urgent yet. The water heater was making a sound. The back left tire was low. She had a dentist appointment she'd been rescheduling for 8 months. She wasn't in despair about any of it. That's what people don't understand about women like Audrey. She wasn't hopeless or broken. She was just managing. Moving through each day with the quiet efficiency of someone who has learned that panic is a luxury, and so is self-pity, and she didn't have room for either one. She was walking back to her car in the Walgreens parking lot, keys in hand, when she saw him. He was sitting on the low concrete wall at the edge of the parking lot, the kind of decorative barrier that's not really meant for sitting, but becomes a bench when people need one. He was an older white man, maybe mid-70s, wearing a collared shirt that was clearly meant for an office and the khaki pants that had at some point been pressed. His shoes were leather. Nice leather, the kind with a specific shine that comes from actual polish, not the spray kind. But he was sitting wrong. That's the only way Audrey could describe it later. He wasn't resting. He was sitting the way a person sits when they've given up on getting up, like his body had simply voted to stop, and his mind hadn't caught up yet to argue. She almost kept walking. She had things to do. Her mother was home with a neighbor who could only stay until 3. She had $11 and the gas gauge and the list of things that weren't urgent yet. She kept walking for approximately 4 steps. Then she stopped. It was the shoes, she would say later. The shoes didn't belong to a man who should be sitting alone on a parking lot wall looking like that. She turned around. "Sir?" She stopped a few feet away, not too close. "You okay?" He looked up. His eyes were pale blue and confused in a way that was more than just surprised. There was something fogged in them, like a window with condensation on the inside. "I was looking for my car," he said. His voice was steady, but the words were unmoored, floating loose from whatever they were supposed to be attached to. "I can't find my car. What does it look like?" He thought about this for a long moment. "It's gray," he said finally, and something in his face shifted, like he knew that wasn't quite enough but couldn't reach for anything more. Audrey looked around the lot. Half the cars in it were some shade of gray. "Do you have your keys with you?" He reached into his shirt pocket, then his pants pocket, then his shirt pocket again. Nothing. He looked at his hands as if they might have an explanation. "Okay," Audrey said. She set her tote bag down on the wall beside him. "That's okay. When did you get here? To the Walgreens?" "I don't." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I was going to pick up something, for my wife." A pause. "She likes those mints, the green ones." Audrey looked at him carefully. She'd spent 3 years in a different life learning to look at people carefully. The way his fingers were moving against his knee, a small rhythmic motion, involuntary. The way his eyes kept drifting left, not tracking anything, just drifting. The slight unevenness in his breathing. This wasn't confusion from a bad day, this was something medical. "Sir, I'm going to sit here with you for a minute," she said, and she sat down on the wall beside him, with the same calm practicality she used for everything. "What's your name?" "Franklin," he said. "Franklin Pruitt. Mr. Pruitt, I'm Audrey. Do you have a phone on you?" He didn't, or if he did, he couldn't find it. "Is there someone I can call for you? Family? A doctor's office?" He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes cleared slightly, the way they sometimes do. She'd seen it with her mother, those windows of sudden sharpness in the fog. "My son." "Theodore." No, wait." His brow furrowed deeply. "My son's name it starts with a D." He shook his head slowly. I'm sorry, I can't." "That's all right," Audrey said. Her voice didn't change pitch, didn't tighten with alarm or soften with the kind of exaggerated gentleness people use with the elderly and the very young, the kind that's more about the speaker's discomfort than the listener's dignity. "You don't have to be sorry." She looked at her phone. She had 22% battery and no car charger, because the one she had broke 2 weeks ago and was on the not urgent yet list. She called 911, explained the situation, gave them the address. Then she sat back down next to Franklin Pruitt and waited with him. He was cold. The September afternoon had dropped faster than expected, and his shirt was only a shirt, no jacket. Audrey took the cardigan out of her tote bag, the gray one she kept there because the warehouse was always freezing, and put it around his shoulders. He looked at it with mild surprise, like a small gift he hadn't expected. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I'm not cold," she said, which was half true. While they waited, he talked, and she listened. He told her about his wife, Helen, who had been gone 11 years, who had loved those spearmint mints and old movies, and their garden in late April when the dogwood came in. He told her about a house somewhere in Dublin, the suburb, not Ireland, though he laughed a little at that, a brief clearing in the fog. He told her about a business he'd built, something with distribution and logistics. He used the right words for it, but they came in the wrong order. And he seemed to know they were coming in the wrong order, and there was a grief in that, watching him know. Audrey listened to all of it. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't check the time. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics were efficient and kind. They knew what they were dealing with before they'd been there 2 minutes. "Taya," one of them murmured to the other, a transient ischemic attack, a small stroke, the kind that mimics confusion and memory loss and often passes but sometimes doesn't. One of the paramedics asked Audrey if she was family. "No," she said. "I just found him in the parking lot." "Did you know him before today?" "Never seen him in my life." The paramedic looked at Audrey's cardigan on Franklin Pruitt's shoulders and then back at Audrey and didn't say anything, which was its own kind of statement. Before they loaded Franklin into the ambulance, he reached out and grabbed Audrey's wrist. His grip was stronger than she'd expected. "You stayed," he said. The fog was back, but something underneath it was very clear. "You didn't have to stay." "Of course I stayed," Audrey said. She meant it the way she meant most things, without ceremony. She was home by 3:15, which was when she'd said she'd be home. The neighbor left, and Audrey's mother, Shirley, was at the kitchen table with a puzzle she'd been working on for 3 weeks, the same 500-piece puzzle of Cape Cod in summer, and she had the same 40 pieces left that she'd had for the last 10 days. "You look tired," Shirley said without looking up. "I'm okay, Mama. Did you eat?" "I will." Shirley finally looked up, studying her daughter with the particular precision that sometimes broke through the fog, the sharpness that appeared at unexpected times and was, in some ways, harder to take than the confusion. "Something happened. Nothing bad." Audrey sat down across from her at the table and picked up a puzzle piece, the edge of a blue sky, and turned it in her fingers. "I helped somebody, an old man who was lost." Shirley was quiet for a moment, considering this. "Was he okay?" "I think he will be." Her mother nodded slowly. "Your grandmother would have done the same thing," she said. And that was the whole of it, the entire moral verdict, delivered with the certainty of a woman who had lived long enough to know what mattered and what didn't. Audrey didn't think about Franklin Pruitt much in the days that followed. She had a water heater to monitor, and a tire to add air to, and a mother to medicate, and a warehouse shift that started at 4:30. Life had its own momentum, and it moved with or without reflection. On Friday, 3 days after the Walgreens parking lot, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer it. Unknown numbers were usually about her student loans or someone's attempt to extend her car's warranty. But something made her pick up, maybe the fact that it was a 614 area code, which was Columbus, and most scammers didn't bother with local numbers anymore. "Is this Audrey Banks?" A man's voice, professional, not a scammer's cadence, too unhurried. "Depends who's asking," she said. A pause, and then, briefly, something that was almost a laugh. "Fair enough. My name is Donovan Pruitt. My father is Franklin Pruitt. I understand you found him in a Walgreens parking lot on Tuesday and stayed with him until the ambulance came." Audrey was quiet for a second. "Is he all right?" she said. That was her first question. Not "why are you calling," not "how did you get my number." Is he all right? Donovan Pruitt paused, and in that pause was everything. "He's better. Yes, he's stable. It was a tie-up. He's been in and out of the hospital before. But this one," another pause. "They said if someone hadn't noticed him and called 911 when they did, it could have been significantly worse. He was in a parking lot. In September." The temperature dropped to 52 degrees that night. "I'm glad he's okay," Audrey said. "Mrs. Banks." Another pause. "He talked about you when he was in the hospital. He doesn't always remember things clearly right now, but he remembered you. He kept saying a woman stayed with him, gave him her sweater. He said she had. And I'm quoting him directly. Kind eyes and no patience for nonsense." Despite herself, Audrey laughed. "He wants to thank you in person," Donovan said. "If you're willing." She almost said no. That was the truth of it. She almost said thank you. "I'm glad he's okay. Please tell him I wish him the best," and hung up the phone and gone back to whatever she'd been doing. She didn't know why she said yes. Maybe she'd been thinking about what her mother said about her grandmother. Maybe she was tired, and the tiredness had stripped away the part of her that usually kept people at a careful distance. Maybe she just thought it would be a brief visit. 15 minutes, a handshake, a get well soon that meant it, and then back to her regular life. She drove out to Dublin on Saturday morning. She was expecting a house, a regular house, maybe a nicer than average one, Dublin being Dublin. The gate was the first sign that her expectations needed adjusting. Not a menacing gate, not the kind with spikes and security cameras every 6 feet. Just a quiet iron gate set into a long stone wall, the kind of thing that suggests property extending beyond what can be seen from the road. A keypad, a small speaker. She gave her name and the gate swung open. The driveway was lined with oak trees, and they were starting to turn, early October color, deep amber and red, and they arched over the lane in a way that felt almost staged, like something from a film. She drove through slowly because it seemed right to drive slowly. The house came into view gradually, which is also something that only happens with houses of a certain size. Not a mansion in the movie sense, no columns, no helicopter pad, but large and settled looking, the kind of house that says we have been here for decades and plan to be here for decades more. There were 2 cars in the front, a dark Mercedes and a black Range Rover. Audrey parked her 2014 Civic next to them. One of the hubcaps had a small crack in it. She looked at it for a second, then looked away. She had nothing to apologize for. Donovan Pruitt met her at the door. He was in his late 40s, tall, with the kind of careful posture that comes from years of presenting himself to rooms full of important people. He looked like his father around the eyes. The same pale blue, but the rest of him was brisk and managed in a way Franklin hadn't seemed at all. He shook her hand. "Thank you for coming. How is he today?" she asked. Still her first question. "Good day," Donovan said, and the relief in those 2 words was the most unguarded thing about him. Some days are better than others. Today is good. He took her through the house, and she noticed things without meaning to, the kind of noticing that comes from a particular kind of trained eye. The art on the walls wasn't decorative in the catalog sense. It was personal. Photographs and commissioned pieces, mixed with things that looked like they'd been bought because someone loved them. A photo of Franklin and Helen at what might have been Niagara Falls, younger versions of them, laughing at something outside the frame. A child's drawing, framed, labeled in crayon, Grandpa's garden. Franklin was in a sunroom at the back of the house, in a recliner with a blanket across his lap, and when Audrey came through the door, he looked up, and his face did something immediate. A recognition that didn't need context, didn't need to work through the fog. He just knew her. "There she is," he said, like she was someone who'd been expected. She sat across from him, and they talked for a while. He was clearer than he'd been in the parking lot. The TI's effects had largely faded, though Donovan had explained quietly that they would have to manage more carefully going forward. He remembered details about the parking lot that she'd half forgotten. He remembered that she'd called 911, and that she'd sat next to him, and that she hadn't talked to him in a loud, slow voice the way people sometimes did, and that had mattered to him, the not doing that. "I have something for you," Franklin said eventually, and he gestured to Donovan, who was standing in the doorway. Donovan came forward with an envelope. Audrey looked at it. "We did some research," Donovan said in a careful voice. "We wanted to understand. I don't mean that in an intrusive way. We wanted to understand what would actually help, not just a gesture." She didn't take the envelope yet. "What kind of research?" A pause. "We know about the house in Linden, the mortgage. We know your mother's situation." He paused again. "We know about before." The room was quiet for a second. "Before," Audrey repeated. "You were a trauma nurse," Franklin said. His voice was steady. 21 years. Johns Hopkins, then Ohio State. "You left the profession 9 years ago when your mother's condition deteriorated and you couldn't maintain the hours anymore." He looked at her. "I had good eyes before all this," he said, with a small, dry humor that surprised her. "I know what a person looks like who has seen things and kept quiet about them." Audrey said nothing. She looked at her hands for a moment. "That's why you knew what was happening to me," he said. "In the parking lot. You didn't guess. You knew." She had known. She'd seen TAs before, had seen them during years in an ER where she'd learned to read the body the way a musician reads sheet music, quickly and with precision. She'd known within 3 minutes what was happening to Franklin Pruitt and what needed to happen next. She'd just done it the way she'd always done everything, without announcing it, without needing credit for it. "Take the envelope," Franklin said gently. She took it. Inside was a check for $150,000 and a handwritten letter from Franklin that said, among other things, "I am 81 years old, and I have made a great deal of money and given much of it away in organized, strategic ways that made excellent tax sense. This is not that. This is a debt that has no category. Please accept it in the spirit it is given, which is gratitude too large to leave in an envelope but too important not to try." Audrey read it twice. Then she looked up. "This is too much," she said. "It isn't," Franklin said. "I was just—" "You stayed," he said. "You gave me your sweater. You talked to me like I was a person." His voice didn't waver, but something behind his eyes did. "Do you have any idea how many people walked past that wall?" She didn't say anything. "I counted," he said. "Before you stopped, I'd been sitting there for 40 minutes. 11 people walked past. 3 of them looked directly at me. The sunroom was very quiet. Take the check," he said. Fix your house, pay your mortgage ahead, take your mother somewhere nice. And he paused, and something shifted in his expression, something deliberate. Donovan. Donovan stepped forward again. Tell her the other part, Franklin said. Donovan cleared his throat. My father has established a small foundation. It's been running for 2 years. It helps with elder care costs for low-income families in central Ohio. Caregivers, mostly. People who left careers to look after parents or spouses. He paused. We've been looking for someone to help run the coordination side of it. Someone who understands both the medical reality and the human reality. Someone who has lived both. Audrey looked at him. It's part-time to start, Donovan said. Flexible hours. We understand you have obligations. The salary is. He named a number that was more than twice what the warehouse paid. She looked at Franklin. I'm not doing this out of charity, Franklin said firmly. I'm doing it because I need someone competent and because you are competent. The favor is mine to ask, not mine to grant. She sat in her car for 20 minutes after she left. She didn't cry. Audrey Banks was not especially a crier. She sat with her hands on the steering wheel and looked at the oak trees and the way the afternoon light came through them. And she thought about her mother at the kitchen table with 40 puzzle pieces left. And about a warehouse at 4:30 in the morning. And about an ER in Baltimore where she'd worked a double shift. The night, a 17-year-old boy came in with a gunshot wound, and she'd held his hand for the 11 minutes it took for his mother to arrive, and how she'd known even then that the holding was the most important part of the job, more important than the IV line or the blood pressure cuff, the simple fact of a human hand saying you are not alone right now. She thought about 11 people walking past a wall. She thought about what it cost her to stop, $11 and a cardigan, and 45 minutes she didn't have. She thought about what it would have cost her not to. Then she started the car and drove home, and when she walked in, her mother looked up from the puzzle and said, You have a different face on. Good different or bad different? Audrey asked. Shirley studied her for a long moment with those clear window eyes that appeared without warning. Like your grandmother, she said finally, after she did something that needed doing. I want to stop here for a second and talk to you directly, because I think about this story a lot. Audrey Banks was not a young person with nothing to lose. She was 53 years old with $11 in her account and a mother who needed her. And a back that ached from 9 years of a job that was always supposed to be temporary. She had every practical reason to keep walking toward her car. She stopped anyway, not because she was expecting anything, not because she had extra to spare. Because she looked at a man sitting wrong on a parking lot wall and understood, in the deep instinctive way that some people understand things, that walking away from him was not something she was capable of. I think about the 11 people who walked past. I wonder what they were carrying. I wonder if any of them thought about it later. That old man on the wall, whether he was okay. I wonder if any of them still think about it now. Here's what I believe. And I believe it the same way Audrey's mother believed what she believed, with the certainty of lived experience. The moments that define us are almost never the big ones. They're the small ones. The ones that happen in a Walgreens parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon in September when nobody's watching and you have $11 and a quarter tank of gas and a choice to make. Audrey made hers. What would you have done? I'm not asking to judge. I'm asking because I think it's worth sitting with. We all like to believe we'd be Audrey. The question is whether we practice it in the small ways, the daily ways, the ways that build the habit of stopping before we even know why. If this story made you feel something, leave it in the comments. Tell me about a time someone stopped for you, or a time you stopped for someone else. I read every single one of them, and if you're new here, welcome to Carter Tales. We tell stories about the people who stop. Subscribe because there are more of them than you think, and I think you need to hear about them right now. I'll see you in the next one.